Savaidi. UNICEF turns 75, an organization that started at the end of the Second World War to really address the emergency needs for children, now serves the needs of children worldwide. To celebrate this milestone here in Laos, we decided to study the history of UNICEF in this country that started almost 50 years ago in 1973. And we did this by creating an anthology that tells us the story of the achievements and the challenges to realize the rights of children. A story of muddy boots on the table. Muddy boots because we are in every province, district and village, being with the families, the children, to ensure they get what they need to achieve their rights. And at the table because we are in the policy dialogue. We hope very much that you will enjoy this anthology that tells us how, over the years in Laos, UNICEF has adjusted and adapted to the situation of the children and also the socio-economic development of the country. But most of all, this anthology is the story of the people who are UNICEF, the teams over the decades who have worked committedly, persevered, with passion, with the joy to ensure that the rights of children are realized. We hope you will enjoy this video, and we hope also that you will learn new facts from it. Because in telling of the story, in Lao PDR, UNICEF has worked to give every child not only the best start to life, but every opportunity to achieve their full potential. Khop chai lalai.
People tend to forget about the past, but there is a lot to be learned from the past. Because otherwise, what happens is that we're repeating the same thing and we're making the same mistake. When I arrived, we opened the office at the Langsang Hotels with an international admin and finance officer and a supply assistant, Mr. Song. The fact that UNICEF in Laos were working with the Pathet Lao, trying to provide support to children. And after the success that we have after that, this opened the door to the UN. Because we had a lot of other agencies there. They were afraid at that time to work with the Pathet Lao. As a matter of fact, we were criticized ourselves for working with them as betraying the Lao Government. I told them, you haven't read the peace agreement. If you read the peace agreement, the way the peace agreement is signed in Vientiane in 1973, when you read it carefully and between lines, you could have seen clearly what's going to happen. We had a mandate to provide support to children on both sides of the conflict. But it's a question how to do it, to get some strategic allies. And one of them was the French ambassador. When I went to speak to him to tell me how things here, he gave me read the peace agreement. After that, you come back to me and we discuss. And I told him what the mandate of UNICEF was. He told me, continue on that road and try to do it as much as you can. But another ally, very important that we had, was the Prime Minister himself of the Lao Government, the Prince Suvarnabhumi. When I told him about the mandate that we have, he told me, congratulations. I think this is very good for UNICEF to provide support to all children in Laos, and I will help you to do it. He said that I will call my brother, the Prince Suvarnabhumi, to learn him about the UNICEF cooperation. 4 days after that meeting, I received a call from the Pathet Lao delegation in Vientiane. He invited me to a meeting to discuss UNICEF's cooperation with the Pathet Lao. I arranged a meeting with the Pathet Lao leader, the Prince Suvarnabhumi. The one, he became president after that, when the Pathet Lao took over the reunification of the country. I had a meeting with him in Long Prabang, said for the royal city. Because according to the peace agreement that foresee the establishment of the Provisional National Coalition Government and also the Political National Coalition Council, the Provisional National Government to be headed by the Prime Minister Suvarnabhumi and the Political National Council by Suvarnabhumi. That's why, and also the peace agreement said also, the Provisional National Coalition Government should be in Vientiane, the headquarters, and the Political National Council in Luang Prabang. In that meeting, it was a famous meeting, warmly welcome, and after that, we had a good exchange, because after all this, back and forth exchanging about UNICEF, the way we work, our structure, everything like that. But after all this, I finally convinced him and dissipate all his concern. And finally, the door was open. And I was invited 2 days after to visit Samnea. Samnea was the capital city of the area controlled by the Pathet Lao. I received a call at 8 o'clock at night from the head of the delegation inviting us to go to Samnea. And he told us, the plane will be leaving at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you can bring 2 people with you. We had a very good discussion about the health, nutrition, education of the child. We visited some health centers, we visited hospitals, the school, community centers. 3 days visit. The proposal was rapidly approved and processed by headquarters. And the goods arrived and they were handed over to the Pathet Lao. They really appreciated it. And this started the UNICEF cooperation with the Pathet Lao. He opened the door for us for a good working relationship with the Pathet Laos. After the reunification of the country, I had a meeting with the Prime Minister of the new government of the Lao People's Democratic Republic. And he told me that how appreciative they are of the UNICEF cooperation, and they want UNICEF cooperation to continue. I was the first one of the UN, not the UN resident coordinator, to have a meeting with the Prime Minister, Quezon. Very good meeting, very good exchange, everything like that. He asked that UNICEF cooperation should continue in the country. When I received a word from New York about my replacement, my departure, would you believe that? The Minister of Foreign Affairs didn't want to give the agreement. You have been working with us. We know each other. We want you to continue.
I was the 3rd representative, UNICEF representative in Laos. The first representative was Fritz Lerizon. And they had done even difficult times because right after the revolution, and when I came, the situation was stabilizing. Between 1979 and 1982, period of transition, both for Laos and for UNICEF. At that time, we had a coalition government between the royalist forces of the past and the new socialist forces. The head of UNICEF at that time, when I arrived, was Harry Labouisse, a wonderful man, very dedicated and committed leader of UNICEF. While I was in Laos, there was a change in the leadership of UNICEF. James P. Grant became the executive director. The most visionary, most dynamic, most charismatic leader with many new ideas, including this whole idea of child survival and development, a child survival revolution. Part of my job in Laos was to build a foundation for a child survival revolution. And I was so happy to be part of that. But there were many challenges, both the challenges as well as the achievements. They are interrelated. For me at that time was winning the trust, full trust of the government. And that was not an easy task, but we did it through a series of measures to show that while in Laos there were other donors, there were bilaterals, may have had their vested interest. UNICEF has no other vested interest, only to help the children of Laos. We cultivated very good partnership with the Lao Women's Federation because we wanted to help both children and women in their multiple capacities as girls, as mothers, as citizens. There are two other things that I feel very proud of. One was at that time, all the UNICEF national staff, or most of the UNICEF national staff, were seconded by the government. They were, in other words, they were kind of former government officials that were seconded to UNICEF. So they were not directly hired by UNICEF. And their salary scales were low. And I knew many staff members could not feed their children, could not provide them good nutrition. And I felt guilty. We cannot tolerate a situation in which UNICEF's own staff and their children are malnourished, or not able to go to school, get quality education. So I said, what can we do about it? Now, UNICEF alone could not do much because it's a part of the UN system. Therefore, I made a special appeal to UNICEF headquarters. I said, as the UNICEF representative, it is unacceptable to me that our own staff members don't have enough money to eat, to feed their children, to clothe their children. Let us do something. While we could not change the system unilaterally, UNICEF itself, why don't we provide to our staff payment in kind? So we provided to our local staff rice, salt, sugar, oil, essential commodities, so they could have a decent life. So we instituted that system of payment in kind, partly, which later on became an example in the rest of the world. So I was very proud of that too.
Saluer également le collègue du Laos pour dire que vraiment je suis très content de revenir au Laos, de voir les collègues, de parler un peu de ce pays-là. Et je comprends aussi que tous ceux qui étaient là à mon temps, qu'ils soient tous partis à la retraite, même les plus jeunes, ils ne doivent plus être là. J'étais très bien reçu là-bas en tant qu'Africain, en tant que Noir, même si ces gens n'avaient jamais vu le Noir. J'étais parmi les premiers Noirs à être là-bas. Une fois, j'étais dans une ville qui s'appelle Paxé. Je suis venu pour le lancement de la journée nationale de vaccination. Malheureusement, les femmes ne voulaient pas. L'association locale des femmes ont ramené tous les enfants qui avaient le polio et qui n'arrivaient pas à marcher. Il y en avait au moins une dizaine dans la ville. Lorsque j'ai pris la parole, j'ai fait mon discours. La présidente des femmes aussi m'a montré tous ces enfants qui étaient assis par terre et qui n'arrivaient pas à marcher. Monsieur Sen, vous voulez que tous les enfants de Paxé n'arrivent pas à marcher? Vous voulez qu'ils soient tous comme ces enfants-là? Alors c'était difficile justement à répondre. Mais comment amener ces femmes à comprendre que non, ce n'est pas la vaccination, ou bien ce n'est pas les piqûres qui ont fait ça. Les enfants étaient déjà atteints, la maladie avait déjà atteint le nerf des enfants, mais nous on venait après. Et donc comment leur faire accepter ceci? Donc on les prend, on les amène dans d'autres régions, et elles parlent avec d'autres femmes, et après elles viennent, elles acceptent.
I was just so happy when I arrived in the beautiful UNICEF compound on the Mekong. I knew there were some problems in Laos, but I didn't realize quite how severe they were. So my first priorities were to rebuild the office and UNICEF's image. My priorities were kind of set for me because there were very few staff. There was no program. Basically, the funds had all dried up. Everything needed to be done at once. It was really a 24/7 kind of job for the first year or two. I think the first country program was 1992 to 1997. The priorities were maternal and child health, the priority program being EPI, and maternal mortality, IDD. I mean, the whole gamut, everything had to be tackled. And it all kind of started with the visit of Jim Grant. I think it was in 1991. By then we had a lot of the staffing in place. We had the situation analysis done. We had the country program. Jim Grant visited, and we took him up to Luang Prabang and Zien Quang so he could see what the situation was on the ground. And we got his agreement to get EPI up and running. And then he met with President Nuhak. For me, it was a real lesson in how to get the political will in order to implement the country program. And after he talked to the president about the EPI program, and because he saw it as the entry point on which to then build other programs with the Ministry of Health. President Nuhak left the meeting and went straight to the National Assembly, and the immunization decree was passed. And that created the kind of momentum that we could hardly keep up with. I remember the health and communications section, where one of the things that Jim Grant asked the president to do was to appear on a poster showing himself immunizing a child. We thought we were setting up something kind of a stage situation. I remember the EPI manager came back and said, the president wants to go to the village. I remember saying, "Ce n'est pas le théâtre. The real thing. I want to go to the village and immunize a child in the village." So we had to do a kind of rough turn and get something set up in the village. The EPI strategy was another great success. We developed a zonal approach. This was based on the situation analysis and the data we already had. I feel very lucky that I was there at the time that I was, just when Laos was emerging from years of isolation and war, and the government, the leadership was very keen to re-emerge on the regional stage. And so we had access at the highest levels, and that made a huge difference to have this access and the government support. I have so many memories, and I just still have something that I'm going to show you. Do you remember this? It's still my favorite t-shirt, but I don't wear it a lot because it's 30 years old. And I think it says giving children a future.
I think I arrived in 98. Key thing that I recall doing a lot of work on was the Unexploded Ordnance UXO program. It was a major program at the time, with a lot of fundraising actively going on successfully. And I liked that program in particular because it was across the UN. It wasn't just UNICEF, and it wasn't just any other UN agency, it was multiple. And that brings me to a third focus, where it wasn't so much UNICEF, but UNICEF was beginning to move into the whole realm of working within the UN country team. I think towards the end of my tenure, I did some work as RCAI, and that's actually then took me on to become an RC. And at the time, Carol Bellamy was the head of UNICEF. She was very pro and anxious to get UNICEF people leading the UN country team, so that the UNICEF focus area of children and families and women could become the cornerstone for future UN country team activities. UXO was obviously a part of all that, because so many communities still live with the dangers arising from UXO. All of our programs were integrated into that particular program. Say what we contributed, other than that anything you do that will help develop the children who are the future of a country has to have a huge impact. And we did make big strides in terms of education, in terms of literacy, in terms of immunization rates, breastfeeding promotion, and of course all the work that we were doing with the other agencies on UXO. So I think we made some very fundamental, groundbreaking steps for the country to move forward in those particular social development areas. Probably one of the ones that struck me was going to a UXO demonstration. That was perhaps the first time I'd sort of come into close contact with anything quite so dangerous, and seeing how meticulous the work was to clear a very small patch of ground, I found amazing. You know, people would grid off a very small area, then meticulously search that area, mark where there might have been something that needed to blow up. And then when they'd finished doing that, we all had to retreat behind barriers and hide while they blew it all up. So that, I guess, stuck in my mind pretty vividly.
When I came to Laos in 2000, that happened to be the year when Laos was declared polio-free. I mean, remember, this is 20 years ago, but it was declared polio-free, and it was a major achievement. But obviously, that was due to the hard work of my predecessors. If there was a difference, I think that UNICEF started to create awareness of these more difficult issues, such as violence, abuse, including juvenile justice. And these were issues which were uncomfortable to discuss among government authorities and the social development authorities, and these new areas needed to get acquainted with. I believe that that's where UNICEF started to make a difference, which then was followed up by the next representatives. I would like to mention also child participation, which was quite new in the country, with the youth drop-in centers and Pacts for Life, where young persons could meet and discuss and learn about life skills, reproductive health issues, and sex education, drugs abuse, as some examples. In 2002, it was a youth performance. It happened in Vientiane in preparation for the UN special session on children. And this youth performance took place in front of an audience of the NCMC, the National Committee on Mothers and Children. These young teenagers had written a musical on all aspects of their everyday lives. It was simply brilliant. They danced and sang and brought up serious issues and also address their fears of future and had wishes for better school and better information. And these young performers, they were very outspoken, and it stirred up some persons.
I came to Laos having worked mainly in Africa, so Southeast Asia, and I had worked in India. So I felt very happy during our time working in close partnership. Immunization was rebranded. Would you remember that elephant holding a syringe on its trunk and a little girl sitting on the elephant? And then the Prime Minister was there when we were launching the big push around immunization. The other great achievement, I would say, when government increasingly accepted that there was actually exploitation of children happening. And through UNICEF advocacy, we got to a stage where new laws about protection of children were being crafted. In addition to all this, there were huge challenges in all the work we were doing with the UN country team about the quality of data that we could use to inform policy development and dialogue and action. And UNICEF played quite an instrumental role, training on a dev info, which got accepted as Lao info, because without information that was up to date, it would have been very difficult to design strategies that would really hit at the disparities and challenges we were dealing with. The greatest inspiration for me came from the fact that we had many unfulfilled rights of children, including, as I have already mentioned, in immunization, in education, in protection. But knowing that UNICEF had the tools and the resources, limited as they could be, that with the right strategies, we could make a difference for children. I was there as the representative, but without this strong team, I wouldn't have been able to make a difference.
During my tenure in Laos, there were lots of economic changes taking place, a lot of social changes taking place. Laos was going from a landlocked country to a land-linked country. And the country was reaching out not only in the region, but even beyond the region and forging those linkages. Laos was attracting foreign investment. Laos was attracting tourism. There was more accessibility to groups, to villages, communities that were previously not so reachable. But with all of these changes, there were also increased vulnerabilities for the children and women. And there were more discussion around these of how do we develop the systems and the infrastructure and what sort of supporting mechanism can be put into place for child protection, the protective parts of it. The thing that made me most proud was to be a part of the UNICEF country office team. It was a fantastic team. in the sense that it was very multicultural, very highly qualified professionals working. They had different strengths, but what was common to everyone was their commitment, they were dynamic, they were innovative, and they wanted to help make that change in Laos for children. I was very proud of the work that was achieved during my tenure there in the strengthening of service delivery, in the upstream policy work, and the communications for development initiatives. UNICEF really had a very important role in the country. In 2007, there seemed to be less of an agreement on what data was to use by the different partners. So there were different sets of data going in sometimes in different directions. But I think that the UNICEF experience in conducting the multiple indicator cluster surveys really was important with the national partners, with the international partners, and great strides were seen in pulling together the agreed data and really making data work for the designing of the programs and the strategies. I remember the start when we used to go on field trips, it was very common to have to travel at least 12 hours to reach a community that we wanted to go and work with and that we needed to visit. And thanks to the excellence of our team of drivers and the enthusiasm and commitment of all their staff, that they reached those areas. Each and every visit to the field highlighted the complexities and the layers of the underlying and immediate causes and issues that were affecting the situation of children at that level. So it was in every single visit. I don't think one visit was less than the others, and really coming to grips with it.
So it was a really exciting time, as I remember. And UNICEF was well positioned with the government. At that time, we were using this term, we were at the advocacy table with muddy boots, our field experiences. And so it was exciting because we knew well what was happening at the field, but of course we had very high level access with the government. I think I remember it was the time when the study came out, narrowing the gaps. It was that global study that showed that the best way to achieve MDGs, the best way to have impact it was most cost effective and most impactful on indicators is to go to the most remote areas. So this was a change. I think it was a new strategy for UNICEF, is to really use data to identify the children who are most disadvantaged. And our country program, which we were developing at that time, we called it Closing the Gaps in Lao PDR. Well, so I think in terms of 3 priorities, I think one was just this big shift to focus on narrowing the gaps. And that cut across all the programs. I was particularly interested in early childhood development. I was very pleased with the innovation we did with the television program Ban Konkoi, because it was so new and it had such potential impact. It was a challenge how to reach. The question was how to reach. There's so many children in remote areas that didn't have access to early childhood education, preschool education. But we saw satellite dishes everywhere in the country. But it was a long process to put the program together. We identified Julia with the climation. That was a great discovery. He was new in his career. And in the end, we put together an amazing TV program which impacted children. It taught parents about children about reading, created love for learning. It was an opportunity to cover many, many different things. And it fit within the equity focus because we were reaching the most remote areas. After meeting with high-level officials, governors, we have advocacy discussion, but then at the end I say, I'd like to give you a CD of the Ban Konkoi. And they would just change. They would become like children themselves. Say, oh, my grandchildren love that program, or my children love that program. They watch it every day. And it was really allowed us to connect at a different level. I think with any innovation, it's like, it's difficult when it's easy to build when people have a vision or a view of something, but you're talking about the children's television. This was such a new area. It was hard for them to understand what it could look like because they'd never seen it before. So that was a challenge, and it's totally understandable. It's something new, so new that there is no experience. So that program took like a year to get started. Once people understood what it could look like, there's no stopping them. It was, but just starting the engine with any innovation takes time. It gave UNICEF recognition and a stronger voice for children. Just continuing what we were doing, I think it was the strategy, the shift, and then I think what became very exciting was trying to implement the equity approach at the local level. I remember in education, the focus was working with district level teams and really supporting their planning and really empowering local leaders and communities. In nutrition, also one achievement was national multi-sectoral nutrition strategy. And then that was just moving into action plans, and it was just also moving into local level planning. Oh, so many memories. I mean, with the staff, I think what was amazing, our staff were so connected to government. This was like a back door. I mean, I think all of you, you have the personal home phone numbers of our counterparts. It was like when we compare it to other agencies, unfair advantage. So that's just an overall memory. The right team, right time, right strategy. It was really encouraging.
Lao PDR, such a beautiful country, so nice people, really nice and humble people. Now it is a very nice country office, very nice country office team. Every single staff member is committed, is supportive. I remember every single colleague in that office, from internationals to nationals to professionals and GS staff, drivers. I made a field visit together with the EU ambassador, and then we went to visit the health, education, and WASH program. And later he said, Hong Wei, in my lifetime, I've never met one person who talked so enthusiastically about toilets, but you, UNICEF colleagues. It just shows how committed, how dedicated our colleagues are. So it's really a very treasurable 3 years. The first thing we must do is really to raise the visibility of children, of UNICEF in Laos, and of Laos as a country. For instance, we have hosted so many visits of our national committee delegations. We have hosted the visit of the Royal Highness, the Queen of Belgium. Now, all these activities, we really largely raise the visibility of children, the living conditions, the challenges, as well as the opportunities for UNICEF to make a huge difference in the country. Now, with UNICEF's advocacy, nutrition, stunting has become a national priority. It is included in the 5-year national development, socio-economic development plan. Now, the visibility will always be accompanied by opportunities to partner with them, to advocate with partners, and really to raise resources to support the children. UNICEF Country Office's partnership with EU delegation in Lao PDR is rated as the best practice by the European Commission and is communicated within European Commission globally. I remember my trip to Ponsali. We drove for 9 hours from Vientiane to Ponsali. The road condition is very bumpy. When I think about it, to reach out to places like Ponsali, I feel it is really quite challenging to move support from Vientiane to the far and remote areas. So therefore, we must push down the program closer to our partners on the ground. There are many development partners coming to support. For example, when I first came in, nutrition was not really that visible. It's not a very popular area for support. We advocated jointly with the EU delegation, with other partners. And by the time I was about to leave, there are so many partners coming in the area of food security and nutrition. I can't move ahead without mentioning my field visit to Saravon, accompanying Her Royal Highness, the Queen of Belgium. Laos is such a nice and peaceful country. It doesn't easily hit the headlines or the front page of international media. But for the Queen's visit, and all the lots of international European media, they covered the visit. And for a period of time, people start to know, yes, there's such a beautiful country with beautiful children in Lao PDR.
It's a great honor for me to speak about my modest contribution to the achievements of UNICEF in Laos, and all the credit goes actually to the team. And if I look back at the thinking and the vision for a decade for children in Laos that materialized in the Lao Generation 2030 initiative, the high-level commitment by the Prime Minister, the whole government, and the inclusion of priorities for children in the next socio-economic development plan probably is something that I think was particularly significant for the long-term development. The other very important element, I think, is UNICEF is there before, during, and after emergency situations or crises. And that also was demonstrated in Laos. I remember the floods in Sanamsai district, which actually made the whole team work for quite a long period, both on delivering the development program, but also responding to the very acute emergency. The UNICEF team was the first one to be there right after the unfortunate and dramatic incident occurred, and was probably the last one to continue delivering support to communities and children and communities. I remember my very first trip to Pongsali because that was quite telling in terms of the challenges that have to be addressed. I remember that how we were at the health center, a young woman who then proved to be of adolescent age was rushed into the center delivering actually a baby. I still remember that picture when she was in a cart with two other women dressed in national outfits with her husband, who was also young. And you see the number of challenges there, including the difference between languages that have been spoken by the healthcare provider and the young mother, the challenges of adopting really early breastfeeding practices that will be sustainable. And that is happening also under the conditions where you have health centers which are quite often not sufficiently and adequately supplied with medical equipment, with even not all of them have trained health workers. Many of them rely on health volunteers in remote villages, as we know. I also remember when we went to Sanamsai after the floods, I remember the importance of child-friendly spaces that were set up there. And here I have to say that indeed that's due to coalition of partners, but also the very close collaboration with the Foreign Affairs and with local authorities that helped and assisted us as a lead agency to bring these partners on board and create very quickly these spaces for children. I remember the contrast from one of the first visits when I saw families and children just being in shelters without having much to do during the day, and then a situation when there were the child-friendly spaces established, and you see that children can go there, these are safe spaces, they play, they learn. Wherever you go, you see the level of strength and resilience of families and communities, regardless of the situations they have to confront. And I've seen that after the floods, I've seen that in Pongsali.
I joined UNICEF in Lao PDR in 2020 as the 14th representative for this country office. I joined the office the year something else happened. The COVID-19 pandemic took over the world and turned it upside down. And this is how I entered Vientiane. It was a time of tremendous disruption when the world didn't quite know which direction we were going. We didn't quite know this virus. But to the tribute to UNICEF, we were the first agency to respond to the government's need of providing PPE to all frontline workers. We immediately got into action. We helped to reopen the schools safely. We took all the actions needed to help the country and the leadership of the government contain the pandemic. And this is, I think, because of our decades of work in this country, our ability to operationalize and to be ready to respond. At the time, the government contained the pandemic, and actually for close to a year, we had no more than 50 cases. which was a remarkable achievement. But the one thing that was difficult to contain at the time was misinformation. We're all aware that across social media, there was so much misinformation about the virus and how it spreads, and that needed to be contained. So the communications team with the colleagues got into action and started a strong campaign to provide accurate, credible information, making it accessible to all people in Lao PDR. In fact, we reached over 22 million users and engaged them over 1 million times with this important information. And then the country went through successive waves of the virus, as other countries have done around the world. We realized the saving intervention that is needed to protect populations is the vaccine. And this is where UNICEF plays an important role. So we decided to bring our strengths of our technical expertise and partnerships to deliver the best vaccine plan for the government. It is often said that it is the wings of the aircraft that are the most important, even though it is the engine that gets all the attention. I feel in this instance, UNICEF were the wings that helped take off the vaccine deployment plan. The one wing was our technical expertise, through which we built the cold chain, the capacity around the country to have ultra cold chain facilities to reach every district hospital and center, so that when the vaccine arrived, it could be deployed immediately for the priority groups and later the adolescents and children. The other wing was our partnerships. We engaged every single partner in country in the development community and provided them the information. Exactly what are vaccines? How do they work? What has UNICEF been doing over these years for the childhood immunization program? And through that effort, created a fraternity in this country of key partners who have supported the government and continually mobilized vaccines to arrive. Through the COVAX facility, for example, Laos has received over 5.5 million vaccines. And the aim of the government now is clear: to reach a target of 70% of the population vaccinated. And the role UNICEF played in being the wings to help the aircraft take off for the vaccination of this country cannot be underestimated. Another big area we worked in was really to avert learning losses. The country had a learning crisis, and schools have been closed off and on, continually disrupted over the past 20 months. And we launched the largest and the first ever digital learning platform built on UNICEF and Microsoft's partnership of learning passports, Kangpanya Lao, the Wisdom platform, which currently has over 61,000 users. And this has the entire curriculum of the school loaded on, including exciting videos and exciting programs for younger children, for the younger years. My House, which is a program which is 100% developed in Laos, stories, characters, production, all of this loaded on Kangpanya Lao to offer an alternative when classroom learning is not possible. But we hope to get the children back into the classrooms as soon as possible. These are just some of the examples of what the country has been doing, continuously UNICEF providing support to ensure the public health and the recovery for families as soon as possible. We have similarly been doing tremendous efforts in our water sanitation programs, in our child protection programs with the hotline, given the increase in violence against children. With the launching of the nutrition efforts, across our efforts, we see UNICEF has been at the forefront of the COVID-19 response and recovery. We don't know what 2022 is going to hold for us, but that is the year we launch our new country program, a country program that is built on the principles of equity to give every child in this country a fair chance, on the principles of system strengthening, so we get to every village and every district to ensure every child gets the opportunity it needs, and with voice and agency. The youth are the future, the children are the future, and what is the world they want? We tackle the triple planetary crisis, and we look at human capital development. All of this comes together in our new country program. We hope we will be able to achieve that, to give every child in Lao PDR not only the best start to life, but every opportunity to achieve their potential.